Hans Christian Andersen, the fir tree. And in the forest stood a wonderful little fir tree. It had a good spot. There was plenty of air and light. All around, older friends were growing, both fire trees and pines. The little fir tree desperately wanted to grow up quickly. She didn't think about the warm sunshine or the fresh air. She didn't care about the chatty peasant kids who were picking raspberries and strawberries in the forest. Having filled their cups and strung the berries like beads on thin twigs, they would sit down under the little fir tree to rest and always said, "What a lovely little tree, so pretty and small." The little fir tree didn't want to hear such things. A year passed, and the little fir tree grew another ring. "What a lovely little fir tree, so pretty and small." She didn't want to listen to such things. A year passed, and the little fir tree grew another ring. Another year passed, another one was added. So, by the number of branches you can find out how old the tree was. "Oh, if only I were as big as the other trees," sighed the little fir tree. "Then I would spread my branches wide, lift my head high, and I would be able to see far, far around. Birds would build their nests in my branches, and I would nod my head proudly in the wind. Then I would spread my branches wide, lift my head high, and I would be able to see far, far around. Birds would build their nests in my branches, and I would nod my head proudly in the wind, like the others." Neither the sunshine, nor the singing of the birds, nor the rosy morning and evening clouds brought her the slightest pleasure. Winter had come. The morning and evening clouds brought her not the slightest pleasure. It was winter. Winter was covered with a sparkling blanket of snow. Now and then, a hare would run across the snow, sometimes even jumping over the little fir tree. What an injustice! But 2 more winters passed, and by the third, the tree had grown so much that the hare had to go around it. Yes, grow, grow, and quickly become a big old tree. What could be better than this? Thought the little fir tree. Every autumn, woodcutters would come to the forest and chop down the biggest trees. Every time, the little fir tree trembled with fear at the sight of the huge trees crashing to the ground with a loud noise and crackling. They were stripped of their branches, and they lay on the ground, thin and bare. But, they could hardly be recognized. Then they were stacked on the woodpile and taken away from the forest. Where to? Why, in spring, when the swallows and storks arrived, the little tree asked them if they knew where those trees had been taken, if they had seen them. The swallows didn't know anything, but one of the storks thought for a moment, nodded his head and said, "Yes, I think I saw them at the sea, on my way back from Egypt." Many new ships with magnificent tall masts. They smelled of fir and pine. That's where they are. Oh, I wish I could grow up quickly and sail for the sea. And what is that sea like? What is it like? Well, it's a long story, the stork replied and flew away. "Rejoice in your youth," the little fir trees said in the sunlight. "Rejoice in your healthy growth, your youth, and your life forces." And the wind kissed the tree, the dew shed tears over it, but the fir tree didn't appreciate any of it. Around Christmas, several very young Christmas trees were cut down. Some of them were even smaller than our little tree, which was so eager to grow up quickly. All the cut-down little trees were quite pretty. They weren't stripped of their branches. They were just laid on the sleds and taken away from the forest. "Where to?" the tree asked. "They're no bigger than me. One is even smaller." "And why did they leave all the branches on them? Where are they taking them?" We know," the sparrows shouted. "We were in the city and peeking into the windows. We know where they are taking them." They will receive such an honor that it's hard to even describe. We peeked into the windows and saw they are placed in the middle of a warm room and decorated with the most wonderful things. With gilded apples, honey gingerbreads, and lots of candles. And then, the tree asked, trembling with all its branches. And then, what happened to them afterward? We didn't see anything more, but it was magnificent. Maybe I will go down the same brilliant path, Elle rejoiced. It's better than swimming in the sea. I'm just aching with longing and impatience. I wish Christmas would come soon. Now I've grown as tall and sprawling as those that were cut down last year. Oh, if only I were already lying on the firewood. Oh, if only I were already standing, taken apart by all these delights. In the warm room, and then what? Then, surely, will be even better. Otherwise, why would they decorate me? But what exactly will happen? Oh, how I long to break free from here. I just don't even know what's happening to me. Rejoice with us, the air and sunlight said to her. Rejoice in your youth and the freedom of the forest. But she didn't think about rejoicing, and she kept growing and growing through winter and summer, standing there in her green attire, and everyone who saw her said, "What a wonderful little tree." Finally, Christmas arrived, and they cut down the little tree first. The burning pain and longing did not allow her to even think about the future. Happiness? It was sad to say goodbye to her native forest. With that little corner where she grew up, she knew she would never see her dear friends again. Of firs and pines, bushes, flowers, and maybe even little birds. How sad. The little tree only came to itself when it found itself with the other trees in the yard and heard a voice nearby. Someone's voice. What a wonderful Christmas tree. That's exactly what we need. Two elegantly dressed servants appeared, took the tree, and brought it into the huge, magnificent hall. Portraits hung on the walls, and on the large tiled stove stood Chinese vases with lions on the lids. Everywhere there were rocking chairs, silk-upholstered sofas, and large tables piled high with albums, books, and toys. For a few hundred tailors. At least that's what the children said. They placed the tree in a large tub filled with sand, wrapped the tub in green fabric, and set it on a colorful carpet. How the little tree trembled, wondering if something was about to happen. The servants and young girls arrived and began to decorate it. Here, on the branches, hung little nets filled with sweets, cut out of colored paper. Golden apples and nuts grew, and the dolls began to sway. No doubt about it, they were real little people. The tree had never seen anything like this before. Finally, hundreds of colorful little candles were attached to the branches. Red, blue, white. And at the very top of the tree, there was a large star made of gold leaf. Well, my eyes were simply running wild, looking at all this magnificence, how the Christmas tree sparkled and shone. In the evening, when the candles were lit, everyone said, "Oh," thought Yolka, "I wish the evening would come sooner, and they would light the candles." But what will happen next? Will other trees come from the forest to admire me? Will the sparrows fly to the windows? Will other trees come from the forest to admire me? Will the sparrows not fly to the windows? Or maybe I'll grow into this tub and stand here all dressed up for winter and summer. Yes, lots she knew. From the intense anticipation, her bark even started to hurt. And this is just as unpleasant for the tree, like a headache for us, but now the candles are lit. What a shine, what luxury. The tree trembled with all its branches. One of the candles set the green needles on fire, and the tree felt a sharp burn. And the girl screamed and quickly put it out. "Fire!" The tree didn't dare to tremble anymore, and she got scared, especially because she was afraid of losing even the slightest of her decorations. But all this shine was just overwhelming for her. Suddenly, both halves of the door swung open, and a whole crowd of children burst in. One could think that they intended to knock down the tree. The older ones entered behind him with a dignified air. The little ones stopped as if rooted to the spot, but only for a minute. And then there was such a noise and commotion that it was ringing in my ears. The children danced around the tree, and little by little, all the gifts were torn off it. "What are they doing?" thought the tree. "What does this mean?" The candles burned out, they were put out, and the children were allowed to strip the tree. How did they pounce on it? Only the branches crackled. If the top with the golden star hadn't been securely tied to the ceiling, they would have knocked the tree over. Then the children started dancing again, not letting go of their wonderful toys. No one was looking at the tree anymore, except for the old nanny, and even she was just keeping an eye out. But is there any apple or date left in the branches? "Story, story!" the children shouted, and pulled a little chubby man over to the Christmas tree. He settled down under the tree and said, "Here we are in the forest." "Yes, and the Christmas tree, by the way, will listen too. But I will tell just one story." "Which one do you want? About Ividi Avidi, or about Klumpy Dumpy, who even fell down the stairs?" Some shouted for Ividi Avidi, while others yelled for Klumpy Dumpty, and the noise and commotion grew. One Christmas tree stood quietly and thought, "Don't I have anything better to do?" It had already done its part, and the chubby man went on to tell the story of Klumpy Dumpty, who, even though he fell off a wall, still became famous and won himself a princess. One Christmas tree stood quietly and thought, "Don't I have anything better to do?" She had already done her part, and the chubby man told the story of Klumpy Dumpty, who, even though he fell off a wall, still became famous and won himself a princess. The children clapped their hands and shouted, "More, more!" They wanted to hear about Ividi Avidi too, but they only got Klumpy Dumpty. He still became famous and won himself a princess. The children clapped their hands and shouted, "More, more!" They wanted to hear about Ividi Avidi too, but they only got Klumpy Dumpty. The Christmas tree stood quietly and thoughtfully. The forest birds had never told anything like this. Klumpe Dumpe? He fell off a wall, and yet he got the princess. This is what happens in the world, thought the Christmas tree. She completely believed everything she was hearing right now. After all, it was being told by such a respectable man. She fully believed everything she had just heard. He was telling the story, after all, such a respectable man. Yes, yes. Who knows? Maybe I'll have to fall off a wall too, and then I'll become a princess. And she happily thought about tomorrow. They will decorate her again with candles and ornaments, with golden fruits. Tomorrow I won't tremble, she thought. I want to enjoy my magnificence properly. And tomorrow I'll hear the story of Klumpy Dumpty again, or maybe even about Ividi Avidi. And the little tree stood quietly all night, dreaming about tomorrow. In the morning, the servants and the maid appeared. They're going to start decorating me again, thought the Christmas tree. But they pulled her out of the room. They dragged her up the stairs and shoved her into the darkest corner of the attic, where even daylight couldn't reach. What does this mean? Thought the Christmas tree. What am I doing here? What will I see and hear here? And she leaned against the wall, thinking and thinking. There was plenty of time for that. Days and nights went by, and no one came to check on her. And once, people came to put some boxes in the attic, and the little tree stood completely aside, as if they had forgotten about it. It's winter outside, thought the Christmas tree. The ground has hardened and is covered with snow. So, I can't be planted back in the ground again, so I have to stand under the roof until spring. How cleverly thought out. What kind-hearted people. If only it weren't so dark and so terribly empty here. There isn't even a single little bunny. Oh, how fun it was in the forest. There's snow all around, and little bunnies are hopping through it. It was nice, even when they jumped over me, even though it annoyed me. But now it's so empty here. Beep! Suddenly, a little mouse squeaked and jumped out of its burrow. Behind him there was another one, a little one. They started sniffing the tree and darting between its branches. It's terribly cold here, said the little mice. Otherwise it would have been really nice. That's not true, old Christmas tree. I'm not old at all, replied the tree. There are many trees older than me. Where are you from and what do you know? Asked the little mice. They were terribly curious. Tell us, where is the best place on earth? Have you been there? Have you ever been to the pantry where cheeses are on the shelves, hams are hanging from the ceiling, and where you can dance on greasy candles? You go in skinny and come out fat? I don't know such a place, said the tree, but I know a forest where the sun shines and the birds sing, said the tree. But I know a forest where the sun shines and the birds sing. And she told them about her youth. The little mice had never heard anything like it. They listened to Yolka's story and then said, You've seen so much. How happy you were. Happy? Said Yolka. And she pondered about the time she had just talked about, Yolka said. And I thought about the time I had just talked about. Yes, I suppose. I was doing quite well back then. Then she told them about the evening when she was decorated with gingerbread and candles. Oh, said the little mice, how happy you were, old Yolka. I'm not old at all, protested Yolka. I was taken from the forest just this winter. I'm in my prime, I've just started to grow. You tell such wonderful stories, said the little mice. And the next night they brought 4 more with them who needed to hear Yolka's tales. And the more Yolka told her stories, the clearer she remembered her past, and she felt that she had experienced many good days. But they will come back. And Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. But still, he got the princess. Maybe I will become a princess too. At that moment, the tree remembered a lovely birch that grew in the forest thicket, not far from it. She seemed like a real princess to him. Who is Klumpy Dumpy? The little mice asked. And Yolka told them the whole story. She remembered it word for word. The little mice. They jumped for joy almost to the very top of the tree. The next night a few more mice showed up, and on Sunday even 2 rats came. This story didn't please them at all, which made them very upset. But now, even they had stopped being so fascinated by the story as they were before. Is that the only story you know? The rats asked. Only, Yolka replied. I heard it on the happiest evening of my life. That's when I, however, didn't realize it yet. A truly pathetic story. Do you know anything about fat? And the greasy candles? About the storeroom? No, the tree replied. So happy to stay, the rats said and left. The little mice also scattered, and Yolka sighed. Ah, it was so wonderful when those lively little mice sat around me and listened to my stories. Now this is the end of that. But now I won't miss my chance. I'll be really happy when at last I will see the light of day again. It didn't happen so soon. One morning, people came to clean the attic. The boxes were pulled out, and behind them was Yolka. At first, they roughly tossed her onto the floor, then the servant dragged her down the stairs. Well, now a new life will begin for me, thought Yolka. Suddenly she was hit by a breath of fresh air. A ray of sunshine flashed, and she found herself in the yard. It all happened so quickly. There was so much new and interesting around her that she didn't even have time to look at herself. The yard was adjacent to the garden, where everything was green and blooming. Fresh, fragrant roses hung over the sparkling area. The linden trees were covered in blossoms, and the swallows were flying back and forth, chirping. Cuervovid. My husband is back. But that didn't apply to Yolka. Now I will live, she rejoiced, spreading her branches. Oh, how they have faded and turned yellow. The tree lay in the corner of the yard, among the nettles and weeds. At the top, the golden star was still shining. In the yard, the same kids who jumped and danced around the Yolka on Christmas Eve were playing happily. The youngest saw the star and picked it. Look what's left on this nasty old tree, he shouted, and stepped on her branches. The branches crunched. The spruce looked at the young, blossoming life around it. Then she looked at herself and wished to return to her dark corner in the attic. She remembered her youth, the forest, the joyful Christmas Eve, and the little mice happily listening to the tale about the clump dump. Everything is gone. Gone, said the poor Yolka, and I wish I had enjoyed it while I had the time, but now everything is gone. Gone. Then a servant came and chopped the tree into pieces. Everything is gone, gone. A servant came and chopped the tree into pieces. A whole bundle of kindling came out. How hot they blazed under the big kettle. The tree sighed deeply, deeply. These sighs sounded like faint gunshots. The children ran in, settled down in front of the fire, and welcomed each shot. The cheerful beer smelled sweet, while the Yolka, letting out heavy sighs, remembered the clear summer days and the starry winter nights in the forest. The joyful Christmas Eve and the tale about the clump dump, the only story she had ever heard. And so she burned completely, while the boys played in the yard again. The youngest had a shining star on his chest, that very golden star that adorned the Yolka on the happiest evening of her life. Now he has passed, gone into eternity. The Yolka also came to an end, and with it our story. The end. Everything in the world has its end.